Hey, I'm JC Warbeck.
And I'm Clarissa Scheidel. We
We're
are the founders of Three Putt Golf Co.
As avid golfers, we could never find ladies' golf clothing that was comfortable and stylish.
So we decided to create our own brand that is fashionable, comfortable, and size inclusive up to 3X.
Each three-putt piece is uniquely ours. Check out our collection at threeputtgolfco.ca or visit our socials under Three Putt Golf Co.
And remember, Three Putts build character.
Hello and welcome to the Unexpected Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Stacey Comer. In this podcast, we talk to people who have had interesting stories in general or just unexpected things happen in their lives that have changed their path a little bit. And sometimes we chat with experts who can help you get through your own path in life. I'm speaking with one of those experts on many things today. Theresa Lynn is here. Theresa, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome, Stacey. Thank you for having me.
Clarity at Work is your company, Theresa. So before we get into it, tell me a little bit about what Clarity at Work is.
So Clarity at Work is a consulting practice that I stood up after leaving TELUS. And it works in the space between human resources, organizational strategy, and artificial intelligence. So the Bermuda Triangle of where things can go incredibly right or disastrously wrong.
Now, one of the things too that when you talk about with the HR strategy and with the governance, and I'm just kind of reading this because I want to make sure I get the terms right. But so some people or a lot of people, when they think AI, they think, it's tools and it's tech and that kind of things. But you're more like with the organizational risk and with people and decision making. So tell me about that part of things and how you work with that.
So if we think of it in the most fundamental practical terms, AI implementation is going to succeed or fail not on the technology. It's going to succeed or fail based on the organization's ability to adapt, the ability to gain clarity on what the issue is that you're trying to actually solve. So before you roll out any kind of AI stuff, you need to get really clear on what's your organizational strategy, where do your people fit in, and how do you use that to solve the problem? So when you think of governance and ethics, which is the drum I just bang nonstop, it's making sure that you can move your business forward with your team to success, as opposed to creating chaos on your team that ultimately will become an expensive mistake and not actually give you the outcomes that you want. So they're two extremes.
Well, and you have an extensive background in HR, like I mentioned, and I'm just going to step back a little bit before we get more into the AI space, Theresa. When you worked at TELUS, you worked on a number of projects, and one of them was having to deal with a number of wildfires that were happening in Alberta. Tell me a little bit about that experience, and what are you most proud of when you think back to how you and your team dealt with those situations?
Those are the heroic moments you look back and you go, oh my gosh, right? The community support and the opportunities and the awards. But what stands out kind of above all of that are two things: the ability for that team to deliver their best work in the most chaotic circumstances. So if you think of Fort McMurray, 911 remained operational through the entire crisis. The communication systems for NAVCAN never went down. The ability for first responders to talk to each other never went down because of the team that was working on that. So the relentless commitment to doing what needs to be done in the face of an emergency, 100%, probably my proudest moments. And then on more of a kind of smile file, the moment that's probably forever etched in my brain was I would work nights in the Emergency Operations Center during the fire, and I had a colleague that would work days. So at night, you'd get everybody coming in and we would do the sit rep or the situational kind of readout of what happened during the day and what we're planning for at night. And every evening, the operations center would be filled with these, larger than life personalities, the heroes of the fire that you would see on TV, Chief Darby, for example, and Daryl from Alberta wildfires. And within about an hour, almost all of those guys would have gotten a hug from me. And like a big hug, the kind where like the energy from my short little body just comes out my arms right into them. And I became known during those couple of weeks that we were up there of Theresa with TELUS, she gives the best hugs. And I'll never forget that for as long as I live, because it wasn't about connectivity. It wasn't about a logo on my shirt. It was just human interaction. It It was
And
so good.
probably what they needed during that time too, because everybody's thinking about all these steps we have to take, and here's somebody who is actually, just even if for a moment, giving them something to show that people care.
Yeah, and we're all tired. We're all sleeping about 4 hours.
Hmm.
And, at the start of the fire, we're sleeping in hallways and we're eating whatever we could find. And like, so that was before it really got structured where we had
Yeah.
food and, clothing and basic supplies. So in those early days where everybody was just running on pure adrenaline and caffeine, those mattered more than anything else I could have done.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for your time up there. Obviously, that wasn't tough and or wasn't easy to do. I'm sure it was tough on a lot of people. So it's nice to have people like yourself that step in and companies like TELUS at the time to help, because I can't imagine what a group effort that whole thing must have been and how much you just learned from it in general.
Yeah, it was wild. And the lessons that came out of Slave Lake, Fort Mac, the floods in Calgary, all of those natural disasters have created a level of knowledge inside that organization and many others, because those playbooks would become public and other organizations could use what we were using to shore up their response to, kind of that whole rising tides lift all
Yeah.
boats. And
Yeah.
our emergency operations team were absolutely phenomenal, like, and still are to this day, even though I'm not with them. I know they've got
Hmm.
floods and so
Yeah.
forth starting already this year, and I'm glad I'm not dealing with them firsthand, but I'm sure rooting them on behind the scenes.
Absolutely. Well, and sticking with the HR side of things, Theresa, one of the things that unfortunately is common today is mass layoffs, mass employee layoffs. And we see it across a number of industries. And I'm wondering what advice you can give, because a lot of times I think there are companies who say, well, we're sorry, here's your severance package, but that's as far as it goes. And it's obviously great to get that severance package. But the thing is, you've lost your job. And in some case, this is people's identity. And a lot of employees struggle after they go through this. So, what do you recommend from an HR side of things, that kind of a checklist, I guess, if unfortunately, if employers have to do a mass layoff, or even, one or two people being laid off, what should they be making sure is happening beyond the severance package?
So I think the bar needs to be exponentially higher for employers than it is
Hmm.
right now. And it really gets me kind of fired up when I hear the bad examples. And, we had a RV dealership in my local community that closed down, which employed people that were very, very close to me. And, it was like, oh, we're shutting down in 6 days. And I know my media folks, you're nodding, the way that situation went down in an organization I used to work for,
Yeah.
that is just wrong on so many levels. So, um, what should happen is compassion and respect and support throughout the process. Documented info in an envelope for everybody. Like, here's your package. Here's information on what happens with your RSPs. Here's your severance and how we calculated it. Here's your benefits that are going to be extended for 60 days or 90 days. Here's the mental health supports inside your benefits, so you can deal with the grief of losing your job and your identity for a lot of people. And, all of those things need to be in there. Some companies that do it, unfortunately, too often, they use the transition consultant as kind of a middle
Right.
person to,
Right.
then I'm not the bad guy because I'm not the one laying you off, but I am a support to help you through the toughest time.
Hmm.
I would say from the other side of that chair, which I've been on the management side that's had to make those decisions and had to have those just heart wrenching conversations. These are people you care about. You've watched them expand their families or get married. Like, you've formed super
Hmm.
responsive, like, amazing relationships with them over the years. And I would say compassion first, right? And they should be emotional. They should hit you hard as the leader on that side of the table. You need to have empathy and kindness and all of that stuff. And the minute you don't feel that emotion sitting on the leader side of that table, that you don't feel like you're from a human to human level, given it everything you've got, then you should probably get the hell out. And I say that bluntly because I've heard the story of the leader that couldn't get out of the room fast enough and kind of
Yeah.
snuck out the back door. Well, the organization is imploding. And
Yeah.
the words that come to my mind are, what a coward.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you? How dare you leave as the person who just delivered what was probably the most difficult message of those employees' careers?
Mhm.
How dare you? Do better. Like, and owners and leaders and shareholders and all the people who sit in the chairs that make those decisions, Stacey, they need to be held to a higher standard.
That's the bottom line, I guess. And where does the accountability come, Theresa? If there are employees who have experienced these things and really none or few of the things on your list were done, how do they, because it's a transition, and it's like you said, it's grieving and there's so much going on, but how do they make sure that there's accountability if things didn't go right, and then also where do they go for their next steps if the tools that they needed weren't provided to them?
Yeah, I would certainly say any employer that expects you to sign something immediately, just tell them no.
Mhm.
You have the right as an employee to take the time to read it over, to get independent legal advice, talk to your accountant about your severance. Like, you have that right to do whatever you need to do to make an appropriate, educated response. Secondly, if you feel there are things that are flirting with the wrong side of the Human Rights Act or Canada Labor Codes, occupational health and safety, all of those employment related legislations, take the time to go and look and find some resources before you sign any paperwork with your employers. And I would say on the human level, talk to somebody. Like, yeah, I've seen a few people put it on LinkedIn, kind of,
Mhm.
holy crap, like, here's my swan song, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And the amount of support that people will give you will come from the most unsuspecting places.
Yeah.
And,
That is so true.
it's like, you don't have to carry that on your shoulders. And you would be surprised how many people in your network have gone through a similar activity, where they've been downsized or reorged, myself included, twice in my career. And there's life after that, but it doesn't feel like it in the moment.
Mhm.
So get some support, talk to your support system, talk to your counselor, call the mental health hotline if you've got nobody. Hell, call me, shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I will not let you face this alone. It's not fair.
Well, that's important to know, Theresa, as well, because and one of the things that really stood out for me, because I was a victim, I guess you can say, of a mass layoff as well, was the people who were there for support who I did not expect. And then there was the reverse of that too, which some people go through, which you people who you would expect would come forward to you. And to this day, there are some people that I worked with for 15, 20 years that I have not heard from since the day I was laid off. So it's really difficult to navigate that. So even just saying, hey, reach out to me on LinkedIn, like you said, it means the world, and especially when it comes from someone that you don't expect. So yeah, knowledge,
And I would
I guess.
say, in defense of those who haven't reached out,
Yeah.
sometimes it's human nature. It's like when somebody dies and you don't know what to say.
Right. Yeah.
I was watching my lady across the street today mow her lawn. I know her husband passed away 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
I didn't know what to say to walk over and talk to her. So guess what I get to do when we're done?
Yeah.
I'm going to walk over and knock on her door with a plate of cookies and
Yeah.
say, do you have time for a coffee?
Yeah.
And just let her talk.
Yeah, and that's the thing too, is sometimes people don't realize that after everything settles down, everybody's there even for the first couple of weeks, and then there's nobody, right? So
Yeah.
even the fact it's been a couple of weeks, it might be the situation now where everybody has left or gone back and they're not there. So having you come over and do that is just going to make the difference. And same goes for a layoff, right?
You got it. Grief is grief, right? And it doesn't matter if you're losing that feeling of the career that you've worked so hard to build, or if you're losing somebody in your life. Grief is grief, and whatever level that is for you as a person is
Yeah.
okay. Like,
Yeah.
you give yourself permission. It's
Yeah.
good. It's okay.
Yeah. Well, Theresa, because you have expertise in so many areas, I'm going to flip back now to AI, which
Sure.
is, current, and a lot of companies are trying to figure out how to navigate it. So the first thing I want to talk about is we see a lot of people out there now who claim to be experts. And they're, oh, I'm an expert in AI, and I've done this and this. So what should people look for when they are looking to bring somebody in to help them either, how does my business run better using AI, or what should I be looking at implementing? What are some, credentials and just things in general people should be looking for?
Yeah, this one gets me fired right up.
I figured it would.
An AI enthusiast is
Hmm.
not the same as an AI expert. And leaders and organizations need to be asking, what makes this person an expert? Do they have the credentials? Do they have formal training? Are they talking about governance and risk? Or are they simply talking about the benefits, the bright shiny ball at the end of whatever they're trying to sell you? Do they take the time to understand your team and your business and the challenges? Or do they leap right to that technical solution? Am I selling you a car with horsepower that doesn't have enough seats for your people?
Right.
Right. And that's kind of the image I get sometimes with these traveling salesmen trying to throw a little AI on that. There is significant risks that can occur in that AI enabled space. And you, as the business leader, are ultimately accountable for whatever comes out the other side of AI. So if you're not thinking about the risks and the governance and the structure and the data and, records retention policies and all of that stuff, and then you get like a ninja kick in the head because something has gone wrong, that is going to be a really uncomfortable conversation with your lawyer because they're going to go, why didn't you check it out? Why? Like, you ought to have known. So I would say if you don't know where else to start, literally ask your AI tool. They sit
Right.
down in front of it and say, this is the kind of business I have. And somebody is trying to sell me an AI solution. What are the things I should be thinking of in terms of ethical risk, governance risk, legal risk, on and on and on, data privacy risk? And it's not going to give you all of the answers, but it is going
Hmm.
to help you ask more educated questions. And yeah, there's lots of research out there now. So the it used to be you could say plausible deniability. I
Right.
didn't know. The courts are saying that is not a good enough excuse. You ought to have known.
Well, and I guess if you're talking to somebody who's trying to say they want to come into your organization and they can't even get the names of the AI tools right, that would probably be a red flag as well.
Yeah, if they're calling it chat GTP, and what's going through your head is like chatting with toilet paper, you clearly know that person probably doesn't have what you need in your organization.
It's right. Just some common sense
Yeah,
stuff too, right?
just yeah. I mean, if it sounds funny, it probably is. It's kind of like a spam email, right? If it reads a little off,
Yeah.
it's probably off. This is no different.
Yeah, yeah, that makes total sense. Now, what about organizations? You talk about how some organizations haven't given their teams confidence to use AI, and so not just the tools. So, how do you make sure that that happens? Because it is intimidating to a lot of people. Even myself, I learned so much. I had a meeting with you just to talk about some of these things, and even just how to prompt things properly. Like it's overwhelming for some people, and so you can say, hey, here's this shiny new tool, but if they don't have the confidence to use it, how do you get around that?
Well, and if they had a little bit of confidence, I took it away on the last question. So now they're terrified, right?
Right, right.
So I would say, Stacey, let's go to the Clarity at Work bowling alley. And this is the clearest example I can use to help explain people. So if you're standing at the end of a bowling alley, and on one hand, you've got a gutter, and in this gutter with your left hand, you're going to say, here's all the things we're not going to permit. We're never going to put customer data in there. We're never going to put medical records in there. Whatever that golden thing is in your business, and they're going to be different depending on the type of business, you're going to put that firmly in bright red letters on this side. In the other gutter, you're going to tell them what is acceptable. We are going to use this enterprise version of this tool. We are going to use this condoned platform. We are going to use, X, Y, and Z. So we're saying this is allowed. At the end are the problems we're going to solve. Those pins are right down to the nuts and bolts of the issues in your organization that you are working for. And identifying those 10 pins are going to be the hardest thing you do. The gutters are easy, the pins are going to be hard. Then what happens is in that bowling lane where you're going to throw that bowling ball or roll that bowling ball, you have given permission for your team to play safely in that box. If you don't do what's on the right, people are going to be too scared to try things. If you don't do what's on the left, people are going to be bringing risk into your business that you don't want. But if you set your boundaries nice and tight, you're going to create that environment where you can innovate to solve those problems that are your 10 bowling pins. And it's really get right down to the nitty gritty. So instead of, we're going to reduce the time it takes us to solve this customer's problem, you need to keep going down through the whys of that equation, going, why do we have that customer problem? Well, because of this. Okay, why do we have this? And on until you figure it out really clearly what you want to do. Then unleash the AI and you will get really great results.
Are there certain things, Theresa, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit, that should never be put into the algorithm that AI should deal with within a company?
Yeah, I think there's the legal bucket that your lawyer would absolutely want me to be telling you. And there's international organizations around privacy and ethics and those types of things. So those are readily available with a Google. You can go out there, you can ask your AI tool, on an ethical standard or privacy standard, what shouldn't go into AI. Mm-hmm. On the other side, I would say the things that we actually can control are the things that require judgment calls, integrity, and to put it kind of in black and white, I would never want a robot enabled by AI to do those mass layoffs we just talked about.
Right.
I would never want an AI tool determining with no oversight a mortgage denial. Why? Because data mistakes happen, technology mistakes happen. Things need human judgment. Those things absolutely need human oversight. So if it's one of those things where you're going, well, it's not just black and white or it's not just a data outcome, mm-hmm. I would build in the governance layer at every step. So if I'm going to let you as my employee use AI, ultimately it is me as your supervisor that should be the one throat to choke. So organizations, I had this conversation with the government locally, they brought forward an AI policy and it said at the end of the day, the CAO or the city manager is going to be the person accountable. And I challenged them on that and I said, the manager of the person using the AI tool, provided they're still within the box of what's allowed, is the one that should be on the approving end or the accountable end so that you actually know what's going on inside your organization. As a CEO, I would have no idea what was going on in a 40,000 person organization. Right. So yeah, those are some of the fundamentals I would build in: proper mm-hmm. checks, proper reviews, challenge your data. I talked about the story with you when we were together about an algorithm on a very popular software down in the States that was excluding people. And it was basically discriminating based on age and ethnic background mm-hmm. because it was pulling out, our most successful employees went to these schools in these years. But what that comes out on the other side is you're too old or you didn't fit into that, predominantly white university yep. that's super expensive. So if you weren't privileged enough to be in that bucket, then they were ruling out your resumes. Well, they're in a whole pile of trouble.
Yeah. And you make a good point to make sure that there is still the checks and balances. You can't just throw everything to AI and say, okay, do it. It's good.
Yeah. Nor would you do that with a really keen new employee, right? Treat AI like a really, really smart, overly excitable, always aiming to please you employee.
Right.
Put the guardrails on. You're not going to give them the checkbook. So I wouldn't give AI my finances, right?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
At 3-Putt Golf Co., we designed everything from the bottom up, so each piece is uniquely ours. We create golf apparel that looks good and moves with you. We are a Canadian company based out of Saskatchewan, and you can check out our full collection at 3puttgolfco.ca. You can also check out our social media handles at 3puttgolfco. Remember, 3 putts build character.
One thing too, Theresa, that you say that, especially for smaller or mid-sized organizations, they often feel like they're stuck between either doing nothing or trying everything. So, what is one of the mistakes or the most common mistakes that you see when leaders are trying to roll out new policy? And there's really the fine line of walking between those two things.
Yeah. So one of the things, and it becomes this kind of tug of war, is speed before clarity or clarity before speed. And I would always say sometimes you have to slow down to get the clarity before you can go fast towards the outcome. So take the time up front. I'm going to anchor on, if 90% of the businesses or 95% of the businesses in Alberta and Saskatchewan are small to mid, then you look at 80% of all AI implementations fail. Now you got 90% over here that probably don't have a huge IT department or chief human resource officers or data scientists or ethical advisors.
Mm-hmm.
And 80% of that major investment isn't going to pay off. You really need to stop and get clarity on what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Who's it going to impact? What's the problem you're trying to solve before you ever roll out the how we're going to do it, right? So if AI is the how, the steps to actually hit your outcome, you better be crystal clear on those ends before you start.
Well, and you mentioned, Theresa, governance, and a lot of people hear that word and they roll their eyes like, oh, come on, why do we have to worry about that now on top of everything else, right? So, I guess, how do you convince somebody who just wants to get this all implemented no matter what, and, they want their company to be ahead and on top of everything, that they need to have that AI governance before, everything else comes in?
Yeah, I would say you don't need to make it this mammoth mountain, right? Governance to me is checks and balance, approval, oversight, accountability. If you build those things into your model and you say, here's the oversight, here's how we're going to make sure it's not, excluding everybody over the age of 40, or here's how we're going to make sure that it is treating our staff fairly when it comes to providing recommendations for performance evaluations. Human oversight, basic governance around I'm going to look at it. I'm going to improve it as a human. So you can make a recommendation, but I'm going to poke holes in the data if it doesn't feel right. That's governance.
Yeah.
And you put that all in there. I don't want a small mid business to be swamped in like processes and policies and whatever that nobody's ever going to read. You want to make them really practical, really agile, so they can be applied to every situation. You don't have to change it depending on, is it Sally using it over here in procurement versus Jeff over here in human resources? Your policies should be applicable and your leadership should be able to approve what's going in and what's coming out. And if that piece isn't clear, then tap somebody like me on the shoulder or get a hold of your local post-secondary school and say, help me find some resources on governance that I can bring into my organization.
Yeah. Good plan. And now what about, let's flip it to the other way, Theresa, where some people basically think of AI as just chat GPT, or, all they have to do is put a prompt in and oh, this is going to work wonders. But when you get the proper AI system into your organization, how can that change for the positive? And would people be surprised when they see what some of the things that AI can do to, take away even the time it takes to do a lot of things within a business?
Yeah. So my starting point typically when I'm having a conversation with a client is, what are the things you procrastinate on? What are the activities that you're doing multiple times a week for 15 minutes or more? So I usually say 15 minutes 3 times a week. That is something you would likely procrastinate on. For me, it's this whole pile over here of administrative stuff. I knew when I started my business, I don't like doing the administrative stuff. I'm really bad at it because I procrastinate. So the first thing I automated was to solve my own problem. Right. So I created a bit of an AI solution that deals with expenses and invoicing and, stuff from my bookkeeper and so forth. And that would be a similar conversation inside those organizations is, What are the things that you can take out of your day-to-day tasks to free up the time to do the stuff that brings you value? So if I'm a manager and I'm spending 2 days a week manually pulling reports to see how well my sales team is doing, I'm going to automate those reports, throw a little AI on it to give me some recommendations, then sit down and spend that time with the employees going, hey, this is kind of what the data is showing. Let's have a conversation about how I can help you be better. That's a way better use of your time than copying and pasting from one Excel sheet to another.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even Excel in general just makes me shake a little bit.
Yeah, Claude is really good with Excel. Like Claude's kind of one of my favorite tools for some of that stuff right now. And, if you tell it, this is kind of the analysis that I want to use, or here's all of my data sources, and it can pull it into one cohesive thing. I just took a client's contacts from 2 cell phones, email, CRM software, rental properties, and on and on and on. So you have, I don't know, a few thousand people. And using AI, we have that now into like one cohesive space there that's easy for them to navigate and use those relationships to move their business forward. So we're taking all the time it would have taken to sort out that data, and you let AI clean the data for you. It's a way better use of your time. And then it can actually give you recommendations based on that data, overlaid with the research it can do that says, hey, you have these 10 people in your contact list, and I've done a little LinkedIn research for you. They are likely to be your customers within the next 6 months. You should probably reach out to them. That's where the power of AI can help a small business.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like you said, making things easier. And I think it's a real tough thing to shift the thinking of people, because it's hard to, it's such a new territory for so many people, and especially people trying to bring it into their business.
Yeah, and we've been conditioned to think of it as a technology item. And you've heard me talk to my AI. I talk to my AI like it's a person. I'm very clear on the steps I want, the things I want, the outcomes I want, as opposed to, tell me what the weather's going to be like in Halifax. Right. It's, hey, I'm planning a trip for this sales conference. Tell me who I should be meeting, why I should be meeting them, why they could potentially be a good client, and on and on. It'll give you that vertical depth, as well as the horizontal, where to scan, where to look, and where to put your time. That's to me, that's the money for most small and mid businesses. Get rid of the administrative burden, which is pure operational expense for every company, and free up that time to do the ground game to bring revenue in.
Well, and if we're going to take it to a step the other way, Theresa, what do you think is maybe some of, or maybe let's say the top overrated trend that you see in AI right now?
Top overrated trend. I've been working with a real estate company, helping their realtors use some AI inside their ecosystems to free up their time. And in that case, so I'm just going to kind of level set on why we did this.
Yeah.
So let's say that real estate agency had 100 realtors. Each of those realtors spends somewhere between 16 and 19 hours a week doing administrative tasks that are not directly related to selling a house or helping somebody buy a house. So when we looked at that problem and we said, okay, how can we use AI? I started going, I'm going to show you some examples. And I did it like a Where's Waldo, right?
Okay.
So you put up an example, and you come from media. So you're showing it, and it's like, does this sound like a human wrote it? Does this picture look true? Does this statement sound cheesy? And so you needed to get really good at going, oh, okay, yeah, that's clearly AI, because that person's hand has 7 fingers, or they're missing an ear. And I poke a little cheeky at it because people are relying on it a little too much and I call it the ChatGPT, the easy space, to make graphics and come up with articles or advertising or whatever, but they're not using it enough to really go, help me lean into who is my customer base? What do they look like? Where did they spend their money? Where should I be advertising? And go like really deep into what that buyer profile is. then use that buyer profile to help create your marketing, as opposed to, hey, I'm a realtor, help me create some marketing, and it's going to look like everybody else's on Facebook because you're all doing
Right.
the same thing.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Theresa, one of the things that's associated with AI is the data centers, and people are so critical of the data centers. And I was very interested to learn again from you that there are different regulations for data centers in the States versus Canada, and that there are actually things that are happening because the water is a big concern, the use of water. So in Canada in particular, there are things that are happening to help, get away from that. So can you talk a little bit about that, the differences between the two?
Yeah, so data centers have become like the oil sands of today's day and age. They haven't done a really great job of telling their story and why they aren't this big smear. Like, you may have this image of them being all bad. So when you look at how data centers rolled out into the States, they were largely pushed through very little permitting, huge impacts to the power grid and the ecosystem, the water, the animals, all of it. All of it was like not good, and no consultation with the neighbors living in those spaces to say, hey, like, you're completely ruining our livelihoods. They just kind of came through and they were massive, and I would say to a degree that's probably still happening in the States.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at Alberta in particular, and I've had the opportunity to spend a little time in the AI circle lately with the ministers and some government officials in Alberta, they've got different structures. So they said, if you're going to build an AI data center in Alberta, you must be able to produce your own power. So in Alberta, that's largely meaning natural gas. And people are like, ooh, well, maybe that's not the best thing for the environment. Well, it beats the alternative. So you have to say, what's the cost of not doing it?
Mm-hmm.
The cost of not doing it isn't that we're not going to have data centers. The cost of not doing it is that that data center is going to go into Tennessee and burn coal, which is way worse for the environment.
Right.
And I would say the second thing is, in Alberta, they said any extra energy that comes off those data centers should be used as like an energy capture asset, as opposed to just shooting it up in the air and, out a smokestack. So if you think of things like the Telesky building, or not Telesky, but the Telus Garden buildings in Burnaby. So those buildings take the heat from the equipment in their regular technology operations and use it to heat apartment buildings.
Mm-hmm.
That is the same concept of what Alberta is saying to use with the AI data centers. Take the energy that's coming off those big servers and use them in a way that provides value back to the community. I would love to see low-income housing, libraries, non-for-profits have access to that surplus energy as a way to operationalize their buildings for power and heat without having to pay $600 a month power bills.
Yeah.
And then the water. Oh, the water. So closed loop data centers are pretty much the norm now. So you fill them up once and then they circle through. Now there is other technology that's coming out that uses a water blend. So I think it's like water and glycol or something along that line, similar to antifreeze you would have in your car.
Right.
That keeps your car cool. So that concept goes through and it just keeps getting recircled. And so the environmental footprint comes way down. Are there still environmental risks? Absolutely. Should they have incredibly high standards? Yes. And I don't think they should be on the edge of a residential community. They should be in an industrial area, just like we would put a refinery over in an industrial area or a power plant. Olds is in my backyard, and it's a very hot button topic down there right now with the large data center. That was kind of a surprise. And it wasn't fair process for the community members. So although the community may have understood, the leadership, the people who lived there didn't. And they didn't understand the technology. They weren't given an opportunity to say, hey, that location's not really great because it's right across the street from whatever. Like that should be a case study in what not to do.
Right.
If you want community support, you got to come out on the forefront and talk about what we're doing different, how we're making it better, and that you're listening to your neighbors.
Well, Theresa, as we've gone through the interview, we've really touched on a little bit of everything and that you are an expert in. So I want you to walk through, if a business decided that they wanted to hire you to come in and say, okay, we're a medium-sized business. This is what we do. We really want to take some of the nonsense away that we're wasting time on, and we want to implement AI, and they've got all these things. So you go in and you meet with them, and then you go through what they do. What does that look like as the process happens? And then what does it look like on the other side? How do you help these businesses get to the finish point that they are looking for?
So there's a few things that we start with. It's, first of all, let's get all the stakeholders at the table. So I don't want just your IT people. I want your operations people and your procurement and everybody from this way in your org. And I want some depth. So I want senior leadership, mid-management, frontline workers, so that we can get really nitty gritty on what are the problems that we're going to actually work to solve, as opposed to, I'm going to take a broken process, I'm going to put AI on a broken process, so now I just make mistakes faster. Like, let's just rip that process out, get your endpoints really super clear. Then you sit down and you go, if we redesign this backwards, how do we make it good? So if we're going, our outcome is, this number of widgets produced in this time frame, then let's go back and look at all the pieces that fit into that and analyze each and every one of those to build your process. So you're just breaking it into all the bits and pieces. Then you move your Lego until you get the nice streamline. Then you build the AI process or the automation process, or in some cases you go, actually, it's more beneficial for us just to clean the process up and have people do it. From there, we do a whole ground game around cultural evolution so that you don't wind up with people roadblocking something you feel really passionately about. So change management and buy-in and fair process and education and understanding and all of those things, so that you keep the engagement of the team through it and you're reassuring what that outcome looks like. So if your outcome is not to reduce your workforce, you better be out on the forefront going, hey, our goal is not to cut our staff by 30%. Our goal is to grow our business by 30%, and we're going to need you all with us. If in the absence of information, people will fill it with assumptions, and those are generally wrong, right? So as much as I talk technology, I probably twice as much around culture change and people and supports, and then technology over here, right? So you're just building the marriage, but you're doing it on a really solid foundation of the people. And then at the outcome, like, the customer signs off on everything. So we go through with like phase one, and there's a methodology called the CPMAI methodology. So it's from the folks that bring you the PMP designations. For all our people that run projects. This is their managing AI credentials. So I have it, and you can Google it. It's got a really a really complicated framework that you go through, and every step you stop and you ask really key questions. And if those questions aren't answered, like in a way that's really good, you go back to the previous step until you get it right. It is the number one framework I would recommend to anybody even pondering bringing in like some transformational AI into their business. Go find that framework and read it and see if that image and that flow chart of when you're going through these, multiple steps, at each step, if you don't have that clear outcome and those clear questions answered, you go back to the step before and get that part right. And if organizations did that, we would not have an 80% failure rate on AI implementations.
Yeah. So it's just a learning curve and getting everybody up to where they need to be.
Yeah, it's change management in its most fundamental form.
Well, Theresa, if somebody is looking to have this information, even if they just want to book a call with you to figure out, hey, is this right for my business? Where is the best place to find you?
clarityatwork.ca or on LinkedIn. So either of those two places, right on my website, you can actually book a call right through my calendar. And not even necessarily need to be a client. Just phone and say, hey, I need to understand a little more before I move forward. Absolutely. I've got time all day long for business owners who are trying to navigate this.
Awesome. Well, Theresa, again, I learn so much every time we have conversations about this. So thank you for taking the time to explain it and explain it, in a way that everybody can understand. And that's, I guess, why it's called Clarity at Work, because we have that clarity now.
Yeah, we bring clarity to the chaos in today's modern workplaces.
Thank you so much for joining me, Theresa. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Stacey. I appreciate it.
Unexpected Journeys is produced and hosted by me, Stacey Comer. Executive producer is Sean Lannon. Podcast and host representation is Lemmon Entertainment. Thank you to our episode sponsor, 3-Putt Golf Co. You can find us on all social media and podcast sites under the name Unexpected Journeys. Please like and subscribe wherever you're listening to us. We appreciate any and all feedback, and if you are interested in being a guest on the Unexpected Journeys podcast, you can email us at unexpectedjourneyspod@gmail.com. For sponsorship inquiries, send a message to jessica@lemmonent.com. That's lemon with 2 M's. Thank you so much for listening.